Hi friends, today I want to share some of my favorite NeverEnding Story characters I've made so far. For those who don't know, I'm working on a whole series based on the NeverEnding Story. It's going to be a giant diorama in the shape of a book with individual dioramas of different scenes from the movie or book. Let's start with the racing snail. Something about this racing snail I really love. Making snails is actually super fun, and I'm not sure why I haven't made more yet. I start with some tin foil so I can get the approximate shape I want. I roll out a nice piece of Super Sculpey, tapering it from a small end to a larger end, and then I'm going to use some texture tools to give this little snake of clay some texture. Then I'm going to roll that tapered piece of clay into a nice coil, giving that shell-like shape. We're just going to add some more textures in with different tools. This is an old kid's paintbrush, they're like cheapo paintbrushes, are really good for texturizing. I kind of love them. And of course, I'm using a shell to give it a little bit more texture. And now we're going to work on this snail body. I'm using Super Sculpey Living Doll for the snail body. It's very similar to the base color of what I want to go with this snail. I'm making the snail foot using this little flat piece of clay I made with my pasta maker. Now I'm just sizing the area of where I want the snail's body to end or lay out, just using my little cutting tool to slice off little pieces I don't want. I'm going to fill in the backside of the snail now. When I finish my future diorama, you're not going to see this part, but I want to finish it off anyways. I am just adding some tinfoil to take up space. So now I'm using my cool texturizing tool. So now I'm using some cosplay. Cosplay is very flexible even after you bake it. And then I'm going to make some eyeballs out of that cosplay. It also is a really cool color because this cosplay is also translucent. I gave him a little bake. Then I added a little saddle to him for Teeny Weeny. If you're interested in seeing how I made Teeny Weeny, I'll add the NeverEnding Story playlist below. Next, I'm going to paint the racing snail. I'm using a bunch of different techniques here, from dry brushing to washes. His shell is multiple colors. So there you have my first of my favorite characters I've made, the racing snail. Next, we have the rock biter. And I'm starting with a rockbiter's feet. I am not going to try to pronounce that name he has. I will post it right here. To make the rockbiter, I'm going to use a mixture of tinfoil for filler, air drying clay, and a paper towel glue mixture, like paper mache. Now I'm just layering some glue and water over the tissue paper, basically kind of to almost glue him down as well as sculpt him at the same time. I find that the paper clay and the paper mache mixture work really well together. The rockbiter's toes are just solid balls of the air drying clay. I am shaping out his body and then his arms. Now I'm shaping and sizing his head. And I'm shaping his hand. I'm using a mixture of clay tools and paintbrushes to get the texture and the shape I want. There's a few different versions of the rock biter, and I'm making my own take on the rock biter. So with this guy, since he's made from rocks, I'm not looking for a smooth texture. I am looking for something that's very rock-like, has lots of bumps and crannies, and not perfect. So that's the look I'm going for. When painting rock, the undertones have yellows and reds and browns in them, so I'm going to be adding a little bit of an undertone. So to paint the rock biter, I first added those undertones, and then I'm adding some washes of browns and blacks, and you just kind of let this pour down and dab off where you need it, and you just keep layering it. Layering again is the trick, and then dry brushing is the trick. So I'm going over with a dry brush of gray, and then lighter grays and darker grays and some blacks and some whites. And that will bring all the texture of the rocks out on the rock biter. So he's a rock biter, he needs some teeth. So I'm just adding his teeth in here. And I almost forgot, he needs some ears. So I added some ears to him. And there we have my rock biter. This is the howling forest that he's in, and if you'd like to see that whole video, I'll add that to my list as well. Next on my favorites list, we have Artex. And it looks like I didn't officially record the making of his armature, so I showed a little clip there of how I made the armature. I also did not sculpt his hoofs. Hoofs. I did not sculpt those because he's going to be standing in mud. This was my first attempt at sculpting a horse, and I must say, I did a pretty good job. I was very proud of myself. Let's get started. Just slapping some bacon bond on here. I'm nervous, guys. Not only do I like to have my reference photos on the computer, I always like to have a paper copy in hand. Plus, this was giving me the general idea of how big I wanted Artex to be in my diorama. Now I got a variety of horse ears. I just got to pick out the favorite ones I want like the most. So guys, I wanted to show you my process here. This is trial and error. I am figuring out how to make this horse as I go. So I am building upon the horse and then I'm removing parts. I even hacked right into the tinfoil armature because I thought the nose was too wide or from top to bottom. So I took some of that tinfoil out of there, clipped some of that wire out of there, and then I added more clay. I'm going to be working on his eyes next. I have these pre-made little glass eyes. They're blue. I originally wanted the horse to have blue eyes, but you hardly see the color when it's at the end. I also, because the pupil of the horse isn't round, I did take the pen and kind of elongate the pupil a little bit. It's not a detail you end up seeing, but it made me feel good. Right now I'm sketching out an area where I want to add some muscles or some veins. I don't know what they're called on a horse or where they're exactly placed, but I like a little added detail and I'll do my best to make it look like something realistic. Artex is a fantasy horse. He's actually a talking horse. He does not talk in the movie, but in the book he does talk. So I'm going to take the look of Artex in the movie and go from there. So I'm going to make whitish gray horse. So now that he's mostly white, I'm going to take the sponge tool and dab away at him. The sponge tool is great because not only does it give a little bit of texture, which almost appears to be fur-like, it also takes away those paint strokes. So if you're going to use a sponge tool, make sure you do it while the paint's still wet or on your next layer of paint. But I love how the sponge tool is adding some more texture to him. Now adding a little black paint with a mini paintbrush just to get into those little nooks and crannies where there's a lot of shadow. And then I make a little saddle and bridle out of cosplay. His leather would be from purple buffalo. So I feel like it has to have a purple tint. Now I'm gonna make some hair wefts for his mane. This is just white yarn, and I'm gonna wrap the yarn around these sticks. And next I'm going to take my pet grooming brush, then I'm gonna comb out the yarn. You will lose a lot of yarn in the process, and you can just save that yarn for stuffing pillows or whatnot. You could also take that fluff and cut up in little bits and use it for flocking for your diorama. It makes great tree leaves or flowers or even snow. If you want that hair to be really smooth and shiny, you take a flat iron to it and smooth it right out. So once you have those pieces of yarn smooth as you want, trim them off your stick or whatever you have them tied to, place them on some non-stick parchment or plastic, and then you're going to glue the ends of them. I am just using regular Elmer's PVA glue, and then you're going to glue them down to your non-stick surface and let those dry and set aside. And once they're dry, they'll be ready to place on your horse or your doll or whatever you're adding hair to. Now that the hair is dry, let's start adding it to the horse. And I'll be giving Artex a little haircut as we go. Trimming up his mane, and then I'm going to make his tail by gluing some of this hair onto that wire and placing that nice hole I made in his backside and trim off any wire that's not needed because I don't need the long wire on the end. This is just so I can attach the tail to the horse. Once that glue dries and the tail is all set, I will smooth out the tail a little bit, and I'm going to call Artex finished. Today we are making Morla. She's going to go in the NeverEnding Story diorama series I'm making, so she needs to fit into this box.
Possible.
I have a reference photo. So I have my Super Sculpey ready to go, all flattened out with my pasta maker. And then I have some tin foil that I'm going to roll up a ball, and this is going to be the armature for her head. I'm making eyes out of glass cabochons. I am just using a paint pen to make the pupil, and then I'm going to make with turquoise and blue paint just to kind of give it a little bit of difference of color, and then I'll add white for the rest of the eye. So now I'm just using some Bacon Bond to add some clay to the tinfoil. The Bacon Bond helps the clay adhere to the tinfoil. And I'm making spots for the cabochons. And then I'm going to, again, add some more Bacon Bond and then add these eyes to the clay. I'm doing this first because I feel like her eyes are a big feature and I want to work around the eyes. Just adding little wormy dailies here and there just to get her different features, wrinkles and crevices and all her little lines that give her the expression. I'm just using a variety of clay tools, and this old toothbrush of my son's. Toothbrushes are a great tool for adding texture. So this is just kind of like the primer. Next, I'm going to start dry brushing. Dry brushing is a very little amount of paint on your brush. You can even put paint on your brush and then wipe most of it off and then start dry brushing. Dry brushing is a sculptor's best friend when it comes to painting. It just brings out all the details that you sculpted in the clay. It's my favorite thing to do. I'm going to use my dirty paint water. I want to lock some things in place. This is going to look really crazy to you. I'm just adding a little of this air drying clay to get her neck in the right spot. The paper towel, as it dries, she might sag a little bit. So this is a little stiff and it will dry and keep a solid form. So I'm going to bulk out Morla a little bit for her shell mountain. I want the mountain to be probably layers of mud. She has all kinds of growth on top of her. I am sculpting the area of her shell where it meets her neck. I am just using paper towel and glue and water to do this part of the sculpt. It's light, and once it dries and hardens, it won't go anywhere. I'm going to add a base black coat to her whole shell. I want to start to add his mud mixture. You can't have too much mud in this scene.
We don't even care whether or not we care.
I have some kind of like old grass, I guess you would call it. Now I'm just going to add a little more foliage to Morla's turtle shell, and then I think I'm going to call it. And lastly, for this video, I am going to share with you, here's the box
Falkor.
he's going to be in. So I have to make him fit. I think Falkor's base is going to be tinfoil and paper mache. And then I think I'm going to do his face in polymer clay. So I made a little reference layout. Let's get the basic shape with the tinfoil. Basic body. I have this glass cabochons and I'm going to make eyes. I'm going to go with brown. I'm going to paint the rest of it white. Doesn't have to be perfect. This part's going to be mostly hidden. You can print eyes too. If you don't want to paint your own eyes, you just print them. You can print them out on a piece of paper and then glue the paper to the back of these cabochons. He's got quite a snout. So we have the start of Falkor's face. Glue and water. I'm just going to cover everything. Now I'm just paper macheing his legs, and then I'll attach it to the rest of his body. We are using this faux fur. This is like a rug, a faux fur like throw rug. I have these two ear pieces for him, and then I'm gonna go somewhere in this zone. I attached his head. This area is going to be sequins and fur mixed together, and this area is just going to be fur. I'm adding a little more details to Falkor, adding some eyebrow hairs and a few eyelashes, and then I'm going to add a little bit more fur in here just because I think he needs a little bit more fur on his face, and then I'll go ahead and trim where it needs to be trimmed. So that concludes my favorite NeverEnding Story characters I've made so far. Thanks everybody for watching. I still have 2 more dioramas to make for the series. I need to make the childlike princess. Then I want to make a final scene of Fantasia, like a beautiful landscape scene. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you liked all these characters. Let me know which one is your favorite, and we'll see you next time.